Well, everybody knows there was a huge storm in Florida, but of course a little bit before that there was that huge storm in Texas. We're watching these things and thinking how well set up our lives were when we were in the U.S. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that here later in the video. But I wanted to talk about how the recent storms in Florida are being addressed by some people in the news. And it's like the main focus of the reporting is on how many people that were uninsured are, of course, unprotected and have lost everything. And yet I'm also hearing about how the insurance companies are dropping a lot of their customers because they don't want to pay. You know, I mean, insurance companies aren't there to pay out claims, they're there to take premiums. And so when a big, huge storm like that hits and hits a lot of the homes, that's exactly the time when you need them, and that's the time when they're dropping their customers. So we don't normally see so much organization. They're removing the seaweed. This has been here, the whole season it's been here, and it's just sitting here. But today it's getting, you can see the piles. We're guessing that it's going to be used to make fertilizer. From a gardening perspective, you know, living in a place like this that is like a desert, when it's not like a desert, it is a desert. You know, you need some sort of organic material to be able to build soil and grow things. So it's interesting to see them collecting it all, and that's what I'm guessing, is that they're probably going to use it to compost. If they're not, they should be. But we were thinking about, when we saw what happened in Texas, how a lot of people were suffering because of something they didn't expect to happen. In other words, there was a small possibility of something like that happening, but people sort of get lulled into a kind of false sense of security and don't prepare. And so the wise saying is to be prepared for the worst, but to, expect the best. Don't live in fear, obviously. Expect the best, but be prepared for the worst. And what we saw is a lot of people that were not prepared at all. And so this unusual storm comes around, and people's pipes froze, and all of these issues. And it's interesting because just little things would have made their life, would have kept these people from suffering so much. And I don't know if you recall the reporting about the freak storm in Texas, that it froze everything. But a lot of people, if they just would have had some sort of heater, and it's like when we were in the USA and doing the homesteading before we went overseas 11 years ago, it's like we had a wood stove, and we always thought to ourselves that if a storm came and our electric was knocked out, because we did get tornadoes that would frequently come close to us, and sometimes we got some really powerful storms. One day an electric strike went through the roof of our house. I literally saw it come through the roof and hit our lamp fixture. I literally saw the smoke, and it was just, that was a pretty scary moment. And so we always said to ourselves, well, we can always cook on the wood stove. So we can cook on the wood stove and we can stay warm with the wood stove. So we had two of the main pressure points that people were having taken care of. And of course, now
they did it before when the electric went out one time.
And so having backups like that is something that resonates with us. And so when we saw all of those people in the news that were suffering because they couldn't A, cook their food, and B, keep warm, we said to ourselves, wow, that would have never happened to us. And had we been, it didn't matter where you were. I mean, it doesn't matter which state you're in, that risk is always there. So if you're in Texas, nowadays they've got a lot of people that travel and live in converted vans, and they're pretty up on things. I mean, they do things like outfit their vans with diesel heaters. And why couldn't, this is like transferring from one, you transfer ideas. I've always loved transferring an idea that's used in one sphere into another sphere. It's just that people get used to thinking, and it becomes a cliche phrase, thinking outside of the box, right? Because in your daily life, perhaps a diesel heater makes no sense, but in being prepared for the worst scenario, it does. Having a little heater in the back of the closet and having some diesel in your garage makes a lot of sense in that scenario, and so does having maybe a small wood stove. And so the news media was trying to make it sound like it was the property owner's fault for not being insured, and it seems like on the surface that's a good argument.
After Hurricane Ian made landfall on Florida's southwest coast, thousands of desperate residents are still waiting for help. CBS's Manuel Bojorquez reports tonight on why it's going to be so expensive to rebuild.
Over the weekend, residents were allowed to return to Fort Myers Beach as the complicated process of figuring out what insurance might cover begins.
I don't really think a lot of this is covered, and that's like our biggest concern and fear.
We met Robbie Podgarski in Fort Myers days after the hurricane hit as he assessed damage to the Green Cup Cafe.
The waves splashed around the counters and onto some of the other equipment.
Like so many here, they had insurance for wind damage, but not flood damage. We caught up with him today.
Neither me nor my landlord nor a majority of the homeowners in my community had flood insurance. Since we're in a historic building in technically a FEMA flood zone, our insurance would be more than our mortgage or our rent.
Only 18% of Florida homes have flood insurance, and homeowners here already pay the highest premiums, nearly 3 times the national average for property insurance.
Florida was in crisis 2 years ago. It's in collapse now.
Florida State Senator Jeff Brandes says one problem is a whopping 80% of property insurance lawsuits come from Florida, despite only representing 8% of the nation's insurance claims, driving insurers out or into bankruptcy.
You know, America is one of the most overinsured peoples in the world, and whether you have insurance or not, it seems to come out in the end that the insurance company, a lot of times they just go bankrupt or just refuse to pay claims anyway, or drop their customers, and the premiums become so high they're just ridiculous. And so what it comes down to is you're not really transferring risk, because that's what you're told, is that you're removing risk. You're not really removing risk. You're attempting to remove financial risk, which isn't all of risk, because there's life risk. I was in Florida in the 90s. I was in Central Florida when a huge tornado hit in the middle of the night. I didn't know it was a tornado. I heard a big boom, sounded like an airplane crashed in my yard. It turned out the next morning there were sirens everywhere, and it was 4 miles away from me. Houses, complete houses, were just completely gone, disappeared. I don't mean there were smashed houses sitting there. They were just gone.
All you saw was the foundation,
just the lot.
the slab.
The lot was just lifted up and gone. And these were nice homes. These weren't mobile homes.
That's awful.
You know, this was new construction, nice homes. So some things are just, they're just dangerous and risky to do regardless. And insurance isn't going to save you. So that's my point on that. And so it makes one think about the risks we take when we go overseas, because just yesterday, just a couple of days ago, there was a huge storm in Acapulco, and I don't know if you've seen the footage on it, but you know, the town is underwater and people are underwater, and some people drowned, and it just it seems like living near the water. And here in Baja, I was just thinking just the other day, you know, if there was a tsunami, the whole, pretty much 90% of the peninsula would be underwater. That's not even funny. So, you know, there are mountains, and you would want to be living in the mountains, and some places get flooded out just by too much rain. They don't even have to be near the ocean. So you want to be in high water. I've seen some pretty massive flooding in Italy that wasn't even on the coast. Just cities just underwater that, you know, that we're just getting just an unusual amount of rain, and the water does flow downhill. But I know how these kinds of conversations go. You can't just, you know, live in fear and be 100% safe. But the point is, though, that everyone's got to make a decision on how much risk they're going to take in their life, because we have a mission in life, and we won't be able to complete that mission if we're dead and we're not here. So while we're here, we want to be able to complete that mission, and that is to love our neighbor and help people see things that they should be seeing, and understand things that they should be understanding. All right, so I hope you got something out of that. Thanks for coming to the video, and have a wonderful day.